Natural selection. In this lesson, we're going to explore the science and engineering practices of asking questions and defining solutions, constructing explanations and designing solutions, as well as obtaining, evaluating, and communicating information. Our cross-cutting concepts include patterns, cause and effect, structure and function, and stability and change. Variation in populations. Populations are made up of individuals with different characteristics. Each individual will have slightly different characteristics from others in the same population. So what differences might there be in this population of meerkats? The question is intended to get you considering characteristics that can vary within this population. Examples may include size differences. Some meerkats may be taller or shorter. Some may be broader or thinner. Potentially, there are differences in appearance. For example, more or fewer stripes, darker or lighter fur, or larger or smaller eye patches. There may also be behavioral differences among them. They may have some of them that are more or less watchful. Some may be more or less vocal, and others may be more or less aggressive. Variation affects survival. Some characteristics affect how well an individual can survive in its environment. Meerkats are eaten by jackals. So what characteristics might help a meerkat to survive? Answers might include things like sharp senses of eyesight, smell, or hearing. This will allow meerkats to identify approaching jackals or other predators in the environment. Maybe the ability to run quickly once danger has been spotted, and or the ability to defend themselves with things like sharp teeth or claws. Characteristics are inherited. Some meerkats can run away from jackals more quickly than others. If you are able to run away quicker, you have a greater probability of surviving. Then, when reproduction takes place, the faster meerkats are more likely to pass on those genes that allowed them to survive to their offspring. So the offspring end up inheriting the parent's ability to run away quickly from danger. Changes over time. Fast meerkats are more likely than slow meerkats to survive and reproduce. Over time, how would you expect the average running speed of the population to change? It would probably get faster. So how can we explain this? In each generation, faster meerkats are more likely to survive and reproduce than slower ones. Over time, this would cause the proportion of faster meerkats to increase and the proportion of slower meerkats to decrease, assuming that running speed is a heritable characteristic. Competition. Resources such as food, water, and space are all limited. There are often not enough resources for all the organisms within a population. This means that individuals have to fight for resources in order to survive and reproduce. This is called competition. Variation affects competition. Variation in characteristics affects how well individuals can compete for resources. These antelopes are competing for territory. This is an area in which the antelope lives and reproduces. So which characteristics would help an antelope win? Individuals with successful characteristics are more likely to survive and reproduce. Natural selection. In any population of any species, characteristics that increase an individual's chance of survival are more likely to be passed on to the next generation. Over time, this causes those characteristics to become more common in the population. This process is called natural selection. Inherited characteristics. Natural selection acts on any inherited characteristic that affects survival. Inherited characteristics are passed from parents to their offspring through genes. Each new organism inherits a selection of its parents' genes. This causes offspring to share some, but not all, of each parent's characteristics. So let's dig deeper into natural selection. The theory of natural selection is based on the fact that natural variation among organisms causes them to differ in their ability to survive and reproduce. For example, in a population of rabbits, some will have white fur and some will have brown fur. They will all have to compete for limited resources, such as food, mates, and to avoid predators. In a snowy environment, rabbits with white fur will have better camouflage, and therefore they will be better adapted to the environment. The brown rabbits are more likely to be seen and caught by predators. White rabbits are more likely to survive than the brown rabbits, and therefore more likely to reproduce. Their successful white fur genes will be passed on to the next generation. But the brown fur genes are less likely to do that, especially when there are less brown-furred rabbits to pass those genes on. So as long as the environment stays the same, the frequency of white rabbits in the population will gradually increase at the expense of the brown rabbits. What might happen if global warming caused all the snow to melt? Stages of natural selection. Let's explore each of these stages. Stage number 1. Individuals produce offspring with variation due to genetics. Stage number 2. Offspring compete for food, water, and mates, and have to avoid predators. Stage number 3. Offspring that are better at competing survive and reproduce. Stage number 4. Offspring that are less able to compete reproduce less than the more competitive offspring. And stage number 5. The competitive characteristics increase within the population. Effects of environmental change. Sometimes a change occurs in a population's environment. Characteristics that offered a survival advantage in the old environment may not be as useful anymore in the new environment. Instead, a different set of characteristics may be useful. Snowshoe hares use camouflage to hide from predators. Some hares have darker fur than others. Which fur color would be more useful if the snow melted? It may be advantageous for the population to retain some of the genes that code for the darker fur color, because as environments change, those genes may be needed in the future. After an environmental change, organisms with characteristics suited to the new environment are more likely to survive and reproduce. So how would you expect this to affect the characteristics of the population? Over time, an increasing number of individuals will have characteristics that are successful in the new environment. So let's look at an example of environmental change. And how might a temperature increase affect our rabbit population? Organisms are adapted to the environment where they usually live. So what might happen if that environment changes? In regions with a lot of snow, white rabbits have a survival advantage over brown rabbits because they're harder for predators to spot. This means that white rabbits are more common in this location. An increase in temperature may reduce the amount of snow that falls. The temperature increases, as shown on this dial. What do you think might happen? As the snow recedes, the brown rabbits become better camouflaged than the white ones. This makes white rabbits more likely to be caught and eaten than brown rabbits. If snowy habitats disappear totally, all of the white rabbits could be killed. This would mean that the white rabbits became extinct. What do you think will happen to the brown rabbits? The extinction of white rabbits would mean that brown rabbits have less competition for food and territory. This could lead to a population explosion of our brown friends. So let's summarize this activity. Let's fill in the missing words about competition. Number 1, competition is the struggle between organisms for habitats or resources. They're competing for resources. Animals compete for food, water, and light, species, or mates, as well as territory. If we're talking just simply about plants, we might say that they're only in competition for light here. They may be competing for food species, but we already have food listed on this. Mates is probably most accurate here. Plants compete for minerals, water. We already said light, because we know they make glucose, and space. Competition is a driving force behind, in this case, evolution, change over time. Individuals and species that are more or less competitive are at risk of becoming extinct. Well, if you're less competitive, you're less likely to pass on your genes to the next generation. So individuals and species that are less competitive are at a greater risk of becoming extinct.